In this training session, we're going to take a closer look at the remote update functionality in EventSentry. Remote update is essentially the functionality, the mechanism to manage the remote agents, as well as network devices. But now we're going to focus on agents running on Windows servers and workstations. So we have all the groups here, and I'm going to just pick an example. I'm going to pick the servers group. Expanding it, it tells us here that we have 3 computers in the list. And the easiest thing that I can do with that group is simply check, is the agent installed and is it running? So we're going to hit check status. So that's going to populate the list here and tell us what's about to happen. Take a, pay attention to the action column here. It actually says check status. So this is what we're going to do. If I switch it to push configuration, you'll notice that this is changed right here. But we're going to stick with check status. And just selecting the option here doesn't actually start the process. You have to hit the go button here to start that. So it's skipping the local host because we can already check the status, with the home on the home screen there. And it's telling us that the agents are running, and it's also telling us the remote agent version. So we can see that there's actually a mismatch. One of the agents is running 89, one is running 87. That's because I just installed a patch on the main installation, and usually it takes a few minutes before all the remote agents are updated. And the other thing we can see in the config revision column is that both of these agents are running configuration 103. So what that means is we can now compare their revision with the local revision to see, okay, is this the same one? Probably is. So if I click here and check on the top right, we can see that they're 1 revision behind, which means that I saved the configuration locally here, but I didn't deploy the configuration. So if you look here, we have a save and deploy option here. If I just hit save, it's going to save it locally. It's not going to deploy it. If I hit save and deploy, it's going to deploy it. So let's get back to this dialog here, back to the check status, showing us all the information that we need. There are other options available as well. I'm using the collector in this installation, so I do not need to push the configuration. You can still do that and override it, but generally speaking, it's not necessary. We can deploy the agent. That's also something we don't need to do because the agent is already deployed. And finally, we have the option to manage agents here. We can upgrade the agents. So if we determine, or if we see that the agent is not being upgraded by the collector for whatever reason, then we can manually upgrade the agents. We can start, stop, and restart them. We can also remove the agents. And finally, we can create test events. So that's the same thing that you would do here by clicking the create test events button. So this will create 3 event log entries in the application event log. So you can do that, which is something you can use to test like email notifications, for example. You can do the same thing with remote update by just clicking here, and that will create those events on all the computers you have there. We also have check boxes, so we can uncheck certain hosts. We can say, okay, I don't really care about these 2. I just want to check this one host. Then we can click check status and hit go. So now it's just connecting to this one host. But at the same time, I can also just select the host and do the same thing and hit check status here, which actually does the same exact thing. Let's take a look at a larger group. Let's do a check status here. So here we got 20 computers. We also have, if you right click that area here, you have a context menu where you can also make mass changes here. So for example, let's say you wanted to only apply an update to hosts 10 through 20, but not to 9 from 1 through 9. So you can select them with the shift button, and you can say toggle selection, and they will be cleared. And we can toggle selection again, or we can also say select all or clear all, which will apply to all the hosts here. And then we could selectively, for example, just select these 3 computers. The remote update dialog also has some hidden functionality that allows you to move and manage computers. So for example, let's just say you decided you want to split these up into a Docker group 1 through 9 or 1 through 10, 11 through 20. Then you could simply go here and say select all. And let's just say we want to just unselect these or let's just say toggle selection. You could say move checked hosts. You could move them to a different group, for example. These groups aren't available because they're linked to Active Directory. Or you could also delete them. So if you wanted to mass delete, a group of computers, you can't do that on the left pane here. You have to go into this remote update dialog and utilize these options here. Another thing to point out here is the remote update options. So there are a few things you can do to sort of tweak this remote update process. First of all, you can determine how many threads to use. So if you have a lot of computers that you want to process in parallel, by default it's using 15 threads. You can keep a log for all the remote update results if that's of interest to you. If you don't want to have to press the go button to perform an action, you can uncheck this box. So computers are sorted by default on the output pane here, regardless of whether they're sorted on the left pane. Yeah, there's ways to minimize network traffic. Hosts are pinged. If that's disabled, then you want to clear this checkbox. And some verification options here. And also automatically pushing configurations when we're upgrading agents. And the admin dollar share is the default share that's being used when we're pushing the configuration. Again, that does not apply when you're using the collector and automatically managing agents and the configuration. Let's take a quick look at what it looks like to restart an agent, for example. So we can select this computer here, go to Manage, say Restart Agent, hit Go. And the service has been restarted. Let's take another look at the service group here, another check status here. And we can see that in the meantime, the collector actually updated that remote agent to build 89. Let's also take a look at deploying an agent. So here in the domain controllers group, I have a host, and we're just going to do a check status again. So we can see here that the service is not installed. The management console does have access to the computer, so we're getting an error message, but agent not installed. So now we can switch this to deploy agent and hit the go button, and the management console will now connect to the remote host and deploy the agent. Deploying the agent does not require reboot. And like I mentioned in some of the other videos, there's no requirements on .NET or anything like that either. And I did not speed this up. So the deployment is usually pretty fast. So you can expect this to take about 10 to 15 seconds per host, sometimes even faster. So the agent is installed now. On the bottom, you can always see a nice summary, how long it took. So of course, 14 seconds total, 14 seconds per host. And the agent is installed. Configuration is 0 because it hasn't been retrieved yet. If you do not have access to the computers where you want to install the agent on from the management console, maybe a remote network, for example, but the collector is reachable, and remember the collector is defined here, in this case I put in an IP address, then you can also click on the groups button here and do an agent deployment with a MSI file. You can also do it manually with a configuration file, but generally speaking, MSI is preferred. And the MSI creation does require a third-party application called the WIX, the Wix Toolkit, which I installed on this computer. And you simply click the Create MSI button there. The creation will run in the background. It does take a minute or so. And you can look at the bottom. You can follow the progress here. So step 2 is running. So it's building one for the 32-bit agent, and it's building one. And it's building a 64-bit agent. And when the process is complete, it opens up the folder automatically. It's always in the deployment MSI folder. And now you have 2 MSI files. And you will really just run these on the respective platform, and it will install the agent with the configuration that you have present here. So it's very important that when you create these MSI files, especially when you're using the collector, with the standard security settings, meaning the remote host must be in a group, that you create this MSI after you added the hosts to the group. Okay, so if you have a second domain controller, for example, let's say an SCDC2, and you just built this MSI file here and you run this on the other domain controller, the collector will will not accept that connection because it cannot find this computer. So you want to make sure that the computer name shows up in a group first, and then you create the MSI file. And that's how easy it is to deploy agents and manage agents with the EventSentry Management Console.